The steady, rhythmic rumble of a heavy diesel engine vibrating through my living room floorboards was the first sign that something had gone terribly wrong. It was a crisp Tuesday morning in October, the kind of quiet, ordinary morning in Columbus, Ohio, where the only sounds you usually hear are the distant hum of morning traffic and the rustle of dry leaves blowing across the driveway. I was sitting at the kitchen table, nursing my second cup of black coffee, when the shadow of a massive commercial delivery truck darkened our front bay window. I set my mug down and walked out onto the front porch, pulling my cardigan tighter against the morning chill. A man in a high-visibility yellow vest was already lowering the hydraulic lift gate of his truck, guiding a massive, heavy wooden crate onto a pallet jack. "Arthur Pendleton," the driver called out, leaning over his clipboard. "That's me," I said, stepping down the brick walkway. "But you've got the wrong address, friend. I didn't order anything." The driver checked his paperwork, squinting in the morning light. "I've got an Arthur Pendleton at this address. The invoice is fully paid. Authorization was cleared digitally at 2:14 a.m. this morning." He unclipped the manifest and handed it to me. I adjusted my reading glasses and stared at the paper. My name, my address, and my phone number were printed flawlessly at the top. Below that was a line item that made my chest tighten: 4 high-density commercial computer servers and industrial liquid cooling units. Total cost, $4,200. I looked down at the payment method. It listed the last 4 digits of my home equity line of credit, a specialized account I had set up years ago for major house repairs and emergencies. Beside the payment method, under the section labeled Approval Signature, there was no signature at all. Instead, there was a string of alphanumeric text and a single chilling phrase, authorized via Aegis Home voice command. I looked back at the house. Sitting on the kitchen counter, visible through the window, was a sleek, black, cylindrical device pulsing with a soft, steady, blue light. The Aegis Safety Assistant. My son had installed it 3 weeks ago. I told the driver I was refusing the delivery, citing suspected fraud. After 20 minutes of phone calls with his dispatcher, he reluctantly loaded the massive crate back onto the truck and drove away, leaving me standing alone in the driveway with a piece of paper that proved someone or something had just spent $14,000 of my money while I was asleep. Before we go any further, let me ask you a question. Have you ever looked at a piece of technology in your home, or maybe even a person in your family, and suddenly felt a cold wave of realization that you didn't actually know what they were doing behind your back? If you're watching this from somewhere in the United States or anywhere in the world, really let me know in the comments if you've ever been blindsided by something you trusted implicitly. To understand how a piece of plastic on my kitchen counter nearly destroyed my life, you need to understand who I am, and more importantly, who I was trying to protect. My name is Art. I'm 68 years old, and for 35 years, I worked as a senior IT systems and logistics auditor for one of the largest freight companies in the Midwest. My job, simply put, was to hunt ghosts. When a multi-million-dollar corporation loses a pallet of expensive electronics, or when shipping invoices don't match the physical inventory in a warehouse, they send someone like me to follow the digital footprints. I spent my entire career analyzing network logs, tracing IP addresses, tracking supply chains, and proving that numbers, unlike people, do not lie. I retired 3 years ago. I traded server rooms and auditing spreadsheets for woodworking in my garage, tending to a modest vegetable garden, and spending quiet days with my wife of 42 years, Miriam. We live in a 4-bedroom colonial house that we paid off a decade ago. It's nothing extravagant, but it's ours. Every scratch on the hardwood floors tells a story. Every mark on the doorframe in the kitchen is a record of our son growing up. We had a comfortable retirement built on decades of living below our means and saving diligently. But life has a way of changing your plans when you aren't looking. 6 months ago, Miriam suffered a stroke. It wasn't massive, thank God, but it was enough to change our daily reality. She lost some mobility in her left side and occasionally struggled with her balance. The doctors were optimistic about her physical therapy, but the fear of her falling when I was out in the yard, or the worry that she might need emergency help when I was running to the grocery store, cast a heavy shadow over our home. Miriam is the heart of my life. She has always been the vibrant, social, fiercely independent center of our family. Seeing her suddenly confined to a recliner, frustrated by her own body, was the hardest thing I've ever endured. My sole mission in retirement became making sure she could age with dignity in her own home. I refused to even entertain the idea of an assisted living facility. I promised her she would stay in the house she loved, and I meant it. That vulnerability, that desperate need to keep my wife safe, was the exact crack in the door that my son used to walk in and set his trap. David is 36 years old. He is my only child, and I love him, but I have never been blind to his faults. David has always been a chaser of shortcuts. While other young men his age were building steady careers or learning a trade, David was always one pitch away from becoming a millionaire. He called himself a serial tech entrepreneur, which was a polite way of saying he started software companies that burned through investor cash and quietly folded 18 months later. 3 years ago, he married Chloe. Chloe was polished, charming, and possessed an expensive lifestyle that David's struggling startups could not genuinely support. They drove leased luxury SUVs, took vacations to Tulum and Aspen, and projected an image of massive success on social media. I never asked how they afforded it, mostly out of a desire to keep the peace. After Miriam's stroke, David suddenly became incredibly attentive. He and Chloe were coming over for dinner twice a week. He was constantly asking about Mom's health, her physical therapy schedule, and how I was holding up under the stress of being a full-time caregiver. At first I was touched. I thought the crisis with his mother had finally matured him. Then came the sales pitch. It started on a Sunday afternoon. David came over carrying a sleek, heavily branded black box. He sat me down at the kitchen table with an air of grave concern. "Dad, I'm worried about you," he said, placing his hand over mine. "You're exhausted. You can't watch Mom 24 hours a day. What if she falls while you're in the basement? What if she runs out of her blood pressure medication and you forget to call it in? You need help." "I'm handling it, David," I told him gently. "We have a routine." "You don't have to handle it alone," he insisted. He opened the box and pulled out a black cylindrical smart speaker, along with a handful of small wireless cameras and sensors. "This is the Aegis Safety Assistant. It's a proprietary AI system a buddy of mine is developing for elder care. It's not on the public market yet, but I got you a beta unit. It uses machine learning to monitor the house. It listens for the sound of a fall. It tracks Mom's medication schedules. You can even link it to your bank, so it can automatically order groceries and medical supplies when the sensors detect you're running low. It uses voice recognition. All you or Mom have to do is speak to it." I looked at the device with immediate skepticism. Given my background in IT auditing, I am deeply mistrustful of internet-connected devices scattered around my private living space. "I don't want cameras in my house, David, and I certainly don't want a microphone linked to my checking account." Chloe, who had been sitting quietly on the couch, chimed in. "Art, it's not for you. It's for Miriam. Don't you want the peace of mind knowing she's safe when you step out to get the mail?" My grandfather fell and laid on the floor for 6 hours because he didn't have a system like this. They played my guilt like a finely tuned instrument. They knew I was terrified of failing Miriam. Against my better judgment, I relented. I allowed David to install the main hub in the living room, place motion sensors in the hallways, and set up the automated purchasing system. But looking back, there were subtle warning signs during the installation. Micro-observations that I noticed, but dismissed because he was my son. First, David insisted on setting up the network architecture entirely, by himself, refusing my offer to help configure the router. Second, when it came time to link a payment method for the automated medical supplies, I handed him a voided check for our standard household checking account, which usually carried a balance of about $3,000. David frowned at it. "Dad, the AI requires a primary and a backup funding source with a higher clearance limit in case it needs to dispatch private emergency transport. Servios," he claimed smoothly. Do you still have that HELOC active? The home equity line, just put that in as the backup. It will never actually draw from it unless there's a catastrophic emergency." I hesitated. The HELOC had a zero balance, but it gave us access to over $200,000 of our home's equity. I didn't like it, but David was typing rapidly on his iPad, assuring me it was just a procedural requirement for the beta software. The third warning sign came from Chloe. While David was under the TV routing cables, Chloe was standing by the front window, casually asking Miriam about the current real estate market in our neighborhood, noting how much home values had skyrocketed over the last decade. It was a fleeting conversation, but her eyes held a strange, calculating gleam as she looked around our living room, as if she were appraising the furniture for an estate sale. For 3 weeks, the Aegis system sat quietly. Occasionally, it would order paper towels or a refill of Miriam's vitamins from a local delivery service. It seemed helpful. I let my guard down. Then the $14,000 pallet of computer servers arrived in my driveway. After the delivery truck drove away that Tuesday morning, I walked back into the house, locked the door, and stared at the pulsing blue light on the Aegis hub. My chest was tight, but the panic quickly dissolved into something much colder and sharper. 35 years of professional training kicked in. I wasn't just an old man confused by a smart speaker. I was an auditor looking at an unauthorized transaction. I sat down in my armchair, opened my laptop, and decided to do what I do best. I started digging. I didn't call David. If there was a glitch in his friend's software, I wanted to find it myself. If it wasn't a glitch, I didn't want to alert whoever was responsible that I was onto them. I logged into my online banking portal and pulled up the HELOC account. The $14,200 pending charge was sitting right there at the top, but it wasn't the only one. I scrolled down and my stomach dropped. Over the past 3 weeks, there had been a dozen smaller charges that I had completely missed, because I wasn't in the habit of checking an empty credit line. $450 to Midwest Therapeutic Solutions. Was $200 to Advanced Dietary Replenishment. $850 to Home Care Tech Installations. Altogether, nearly $4,000 had been quietly drained from my home's equity before the massive charge for the servers hit. I opened the Aegis user dashboard on my laptop. It was a sleek, user-friendly interface designed for seniors. I clicked on the Purchase History tab. Sure enough, every single one of those charges was listed, categorized neatly as medical care or property maintenance. Next to each charge was a small icon of a microphone. The system was designed to record the audio of the voice command that authorized the purchase, ostensibly for quality assurance and fraud protection. I clicked the play button next to the $1,200 charge for dietary supplements. A voice came through my laptop speakers. Aegis authorized purchase for medical replenishment. Authorization code Delta 7. Proceed with HELOC draft. I froze. The voice was mine. It had my Midwestern cadence, the slight rasp I've had in my throat since a bout of bronchitis in the 90s, and my exact pitch. But something was horribly wrong with it. It sounded flat, devoid of any natural human breath or hesitation. There was no background noise, no ambient sound of the house. It was perfectly sterile. I clicked the play button for the massive $14,200 server purchase. Aegis authorized hardware acquisition for home security upgrade. Proceed with HELOC draft. Again, my voice, perfectly cloned, mechanically precise. I sat back in my chair, the silence of the living room suddenly feeling oppressive. Someone hadn't just hacked my account. Someone had recorded my voice, run it through artificial intelligence software to create a synthetic clone, and was using it to systematically bypass the voice biometric security on the Aegis system to drain my home equity. What would you have done in that exact moment? Would you have picked up the phone, called your son, and demanded an explanation? If your own child had introduced this machine into your home, could you have brought yourself to suspect them right away? Let me know, because sitting in that chair staring at the screen, a sickening realization began to settle in my gut. I closed the laptop gently. I didn't unplug the Aegis hub. I knew that if I disconnected it, whoever was monitoring the system would instantly receive an offline alert. I needed to investigate quietly. I told Miriam I was running to the hardware store for some gardening supplies. Instead, I drove to an electronics big box store on the other side of town. I paid cash for a high-end, unmanaged network switch, a dedicated laptop with a clean operating system, and a piece of specialized network monitoring hardware known in the IT world as a packet sniffer. When I returned home, Miriam was taking her afternoon nap. I went down into my basement workshop where the main fiber optic internet line entered the house. Carefully, meticulously, I spliced the network switch into the line between the wall and the router David had configured. I connected my new clean laptop to the switch and booted up a program called Wireshark. Wireshark is an incredibly powerful tool. It allows you to see every single packet of data entering and leaving your home network. You might not be able to read the encrypted contents, but you can see exactly where the data is going and where it is coming from. I sat in the dim light of the basement watching lines of code cascade down the screen. I isolated the IP address of the Aegis hub in the living room upstairs. The machine was busy. Even when the house was completely silent, the Aegis hub was transmitting massive amounts of data out to the internet, but it wasn't sending it to a reputable medical supply company or an established tech firm. I traced the destination IP address. It belonged to a private server leased by a local data hosting center right here in downtown Columbus. I needed professional confirmation. I picked up my cell phone and called Marcus. Marcus was a former colleague of mine, a brilliant forensic accountant who had retired a few years before I did. We used to team up to bust embezzlement rings operating within corporate logistics networks. "Art, my friend," Marcus answered. "To what do I owe the pleasure you finally agreed to that fishing trip?" "I need a favor, Marcus," I said, keeping my voice low. "I need you to look up a few corporate registries for me, completely off the books." I read him the names of the vendors listed on my bank statement: Midwest Therapeutic Solutions, Advanced Dietary Replenishment, and Home Care Tech Installations. I heard Marcus tapping away on his keyboard. A few minutes later, he let out a low whistle. "Well, Art, I hope you haven't been buying stock in these places. They aren't real companies. They're shell LLCs, all registered in the state of Delaware exactly 1 month ago. They have no physical storefronts, no state tax licenses in Ohio, and they all route back to a single-parent holding company." "What's the name of the parent company?" I asked, though I could already feel the answer in the marrow of my bones. "Novatech Solutions," Marcus said. I closed my eyes. I felt a physical ache in the center of my chest, a heavy, crushing pressure that had nothing to do with my heart and everything to do with my soul. Novatech Solutions was David's newest startup. He had pitched it to me over dinner 3 months ago as a revolutionary data management firm. My son wasn't just careless. He wasn't just installing faulty beta software. He was the architect of a deliberate, systematic scheme to steal the equity out from under the home his mother and I had worked our entire lives to pay for, using fake companies to launder the money directly into his failing business. I thanked Marcus, hung up the phone, and sat in the dark basement for a long time. The anger was there, certainly, but beneath the anger was a profound, suffocating grief. You raise a child. You teach them right from wrong. You celebrate their first steps. You pay for their college. You stand beside them at their wedding. To realize that the boy you carried on your shoulders now viewed you as nothing more than an oblivious mark, an ATM waiting to be cracked, is a uniquely devastating kind of pain. But the truth was about to get much worse. The financial theft was terrible, but the personal betrayal I was about to uncover nearly broke me. I left the packet sniffer running and quietly walked upstairs. Miriam was still asleep in her recliner, a knitted blanket pulled up to her chin, her chest rising and falling softly. I looked at the Aegis hub pulsing on the counter. I knew that these beta IoT devices often stored temporary cache files locally on their internal flash memory before pushing them to the cloud. I walked over, connected a USB-C cable to the diagnostic port on the back of the device, and linked it to my laptop. I bypassed the basic administrative lock. David had lazily used his birth year as the password and accessed the root directory. I wasn't looking for bank details. I had that. I was looking for the configuration logs. I wanted to see how he had set up the synthetic voice clone. Deep in the directory, I found a folder labeled Sync Backup. It appeared that when David initially configured the hub using his smartphone, the device had automatically pulled a backup of his recent SMS text messages and cached them on the local drive. I opened the text file. It contained a string of messages between David and Chloe, dated the day before they brought the Aegis system to our house. I sat at the kitchen table and read the words my son had written about me. "Chloe, did you finish the voice training model?" Dave. "Yeah, I ripped the audio from the voicemail Dad left me about getting the gutters cleaned. The AI cloned it perfectly. It sounds exactly like him." "Chloe, are you sure he won't notice the charges? You know how he used to be an auditor." "David, Dad's a dinosaur. He's clueless with modern tech. He still balances a physical checkbook. I set the primary draw to their HELOC. He never checks it because it's been at zero for years. By the time he realizes the equity is gone, Novatech will be fully funded, and we'll just say the AI got hacked by a Russian syndicate." "Chloe, I just feel a little weird about it. It's a lot of money." "David, look at it logically. Mom's mind is going. She had a stroke. She's going to end up in a nursing home in a year or two anyway. The state or the medical bills will just eat the house. We're just taking our inheritance early, before the system takes it. It's our money. They don't need it. I stopped reading. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a cold, blinding fury. Mom's mind is going. Miriam's mind was perfectly fine. She had suffered a physical impairment, not a cognitive one. David was already burying us. He had justified robbing his own parents by convincing himself we were already dead, or at least too obsolete to matter. He was exploiting his mother's illness to fund his ego. I looked up at Miriam, sleeping peacefully entirely, unaware that the son she adored was actively plotting to strip her of the only home she felt safe in. I could have confronted him right then. I could have called the police. Mom, I could have stormed over to his leased townhouse and thrown the printed text messages in his face. But 35 years of auditing had taught me one absolute rule: never spring a trap until the cage is fully locked. If I confronted David now, he would remotely wipe the server. He would claim the text messages were fabricated or taken out of context. He would gaslight his mother, turning her against me, making me look like a paranoid old man who didn't understand technology. I needed proof that was legally impenetrable. I needed a situation where he could not deny his actions, where he could not escape the consequences. I had to let him keep believing he had won. I had to let him think I was exactly the clueless dinosaur he believed me to be. The next morning I initiated the calmest, most deliberate operation of my life. I picked up my cell phone and called David. I made sure to let my voice tremble just a little bit, pitching it slightly higher, acting like a confused, anxious senior citizen. "David's son, I'm sorry to bother you at work," I said. "Hey Dad, what's up? Is Mom okay?" He answered, his voice dripping with faux concern. "Mom's fine. It's this machine you gave us. The Aegis thing. A delivery truck showed up yesterday with a giant crate of computer parts. I think the machine made a mistake. It tried to charge $14,000 to the bank." I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line, followed by a masterful pivot into a soothing, patronizing tone. "Oh, Dad, wow. Okay, don't panic. That sounds like a glitch in the beta firmware. The AI must have misinterpreted a television commercial or something and triggered a false purchase order. Did you accept the delivery fee?" "No, I sent the truck away. But I'm worried about the bank account." "Don't worry about it," David said quickly. "I'll remote into the system and run a diagnostic. I'll make sure the charge is reversed and wipe the error from the system. Just leave the machine plugged in so I can access the network." "Okay, you did the right thing calling me. I'll take care of it." "Thank you, son," I said softly. "I just don't understand this modern stuff." "I know, Dad. I've got it handled. Tell Mom I love her." He hung up. I smiled a tight, grim smile and immediately went to work. First, I called Marcus. I told him to meet me at the downtown branch of my bank. When we sat down with the regional branch manager, a woman I had known for over 15 years, I laid out the evidence. I showed her the packet sniffer logs, the IP traces, and the list of fake LLCs. Because no money had officially cleared the final escrow phase for the massive $14,200 purchase since the delivery was refused, the bank hadn't officially logged it as fraud yet. "I need to legally freeze the HELOC immediately," I told the manager. "But I need you to do it invisibly. If the AI system pings the bank's API, it needs to see the account as active and fully funded." "We can set up a shadow account," the manager explained, deeply disturbed by what I'd shown her. "We freeze the actual equity line protecting your home. We then create a mirror account number that connects to a honeypot. It will look identical to the software. If he attempts to authorize another draft, the system will approve the request on his end, but the funds will instantly route into a locked fraud investigation escrow controlled by the bank's security department. The moment he hits accept, he generates a federal wire fraud alert." "Do it," I said. Next, I drove to the office of an elder law attorney. Over the course of 3 hours, I drafted an irrevocable living trust. I moved the deed to the house, all of our retirement accounts, and every liquid asset we owned completely out of my and Miriam's direct names and into the trust. I appointed Marcus as the independent trustee. Even if David managed to forge our signatures or claim we were mentally incompetent in the future, he could not touch a single dime. The wall was built. Finally, I returned home. I went to the hardware store and bought 3 small, old-school, closed-circuit security cameras. The kind that don't connect to Wi-Fi. The kind that wire directly into a physical hard drive, hidden in a locked cabinet in my basement. I installed one in the living room, pointing directly at the kitchen table and the Aegis hub. I was ready. I just needed to bring the rat to the cheese. I'd love to know what you think right now. If you were in my shoes setting up a trap for your own son, would your heart be breaking, or would you be entirely focused on the justice of it? Let me know, because honestly, I felt completely numb. On Thursday evening, I called David and invited him and Chloe over for Sunday dinner. I told him Miriam was feeling exceptionally well, and that I wanted to cook a pot roast to celebrate. I also casually mentioned that I had been reviewing our finances, and since the glitch with the AI was sorted out, I wanted to talk to him about possibly investing some of our savings into his new company, Novatech. The bait was irresistible. Greed always makes people blind. Sunday arrived. The house smelled of roasting beef, carrots, and thyme. Miriam was sitting in her wheelchair at the head of the dining table, looking beautiful, in a blue sweater, smiling brightly, as David and Chloe walked through the front door. David brought a bottle of expensive wine. Chloe brought flowers. They played the roles of the loving, devoted children flawlessly. They kissed Miriam's cheek. They asked about her physical therapy. They complimented the smell of the food. We sat down to eat. The Aegis hub pulsed quietly on the counter behind them. The hidden camera in the bookshelf recorded everything. Halfway through the meal, David leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine glass. "So, Dad, you mentioned on the phone you were looking at your finances, thinking about diversifying your portfolio." "I am," I said calmly, cutting a piece of roast. "With your mother's condition, I realized sitting on all this home equity wasn't doing us any good. I want to put it somewhere it can grow. You mentioned Novatech was looking for a new round of funding." David's eyes lit up. He glanced at Chloe, who offered a subtle, encouraging smile. "We are actually," David said, leaning forward, slipping seamlessly into his pitchman persona. "We're on the verge of a major breakthrough in data management. We just need a bridge round to scale up our server capacity. If you were to invest, say, $50,000 from the HELOC, I could guarantee you a 20% return in 12 months. It would easily cover Mom's medical expenses for the next decade." 50,000. I repeated slowly, nodding as if considering it. "That's a significant amount of money. I'd have to authorize a wire transfer." "Oh, you don't even have to go to the bank," David said smoothly. He pulled his smartphone out of his pocket and laid it on the table. "I linked the Aegis system to the bank's API. Remember, I can initiate an institutional transfer right now through the admin portal. You just have to give the voice command and it's done. Seamless." He tapped a few buttons on his phone screen. He was initiating the draw from the shadow account I had set up. He thought he was about to drain $50,000 of my money. He thought he had won. "Just say the word, damn," David smiled, looking at me with absolute predatory confidence. I put my fork down. I wiped my mouth with my napkin, folded it neatly, and placed it on the table. The room was perfectly quiet. "I don't think I'll be doing that, David," I said, my voice steady, stripped of any old man confusion. David's smile faltered slightly. "Dad, we talked about this. It's the smart move." "Is it as smart as advanced dietary replenishment?" I asked. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. David froze. His thumb hovered over his phone screen. Chloe stopped chewing. I don't know what you mean," David stammered, his eyes darting toward the Aegis hub. "Or maybe it's as smart as Midwest Therapeutic Solutions." I continued leaning forward, resting my forearms on the table. "Or maybe Home Care Tech Installations. I'm just curious, David, when you were setting up these shell LLCs in Delaware, did you really think an IT systems or auditor wouldn't check the IP routing on a $14,000 server invoice?" David's face drained of color. He looked like a man who had stepped off a cliff and was waiting for the ground to hit him. "Dad, listen, you don't understand the technology." "I understand packet sniffing, David," I said, my voice rising just enough to cut through his lies like a razor. "I understand that the Aegis system has been quietly routing thousands of dollars from my home equity directly to a server hosted downtown, legally registered to Novatech Solutions." I reached under my chair and pulled out a thick manila folder. I tossed it onto the center of the dining table. It landed with a heavy, satisfying thud next to the gravy boat. "What is that?" Chloe asked, her voice trembling. "That is a physical printout of every network packet, every fake invoice, and every IP trace linking this machine to your husband's failing startup," I said. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my smartphone, and tapped the screen. I had connected it via Bluetooth to the living room sound system earlier that day. My synthetic cloned voice echoed through the dining room from the overhead speakers. Akijis authorized purchase for medical replenishment. Authorization code Delta 7. Proceed with HELOC draft. Miriam gasped, looking confused and horrified. Art, when did you say that? I didn't, Miriam, I said gently to my wife before turning my absolute focus back to my son. David did. He cloned my voice, but that isn't even the worst part. The worst part, David, is what you left on the local cache drive. I tapped my phone again. The living room TV instantly powered on, mirroring my screen, in giant black letters against a bright white background. The text message exchange between David and Chloe appeared on the 70-inch screen. Dad's a dinosaur. Mom's mind is going. We're just taking our inheritance early. David stared at the television. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The arrogance, the condescension, the absolute certainty that he was the smartest person in the room, it all shattered into a million jagged pieces. Chloe abruptly stood up her chair, scraping violently against the hardwood floor. I told him not to do this. I told him it was wrong, she cried instantly, throwing her husband to the wolves to save herself. Sit down, Chloe, I commanded. My voice wasn't loud, but it possessed a weight that made her freeze. She slowly sank back into her chair, covering her mouth. David finally found his voice. It was small, reedy, and pathetic. Dad, please, Novatech is going under. We have a mountain of debt. If we default, we lose our house. I was going to pay you back, I swear. Just let me cancel the final transfer. I won't hit accept. He reached for his phone on the table. Before his fingers could touch the glass, I reached out and clamped my hand over his wrist. My grip was like iron. You already hit initiate, David, I said softly, staring directly into his panicked eyes. When you typed those numbers in 2 minutes ago, you didn't ping my HELOC. You pinged a Honeypot account monitored by the bank's fraud security division. The moment you initiated a $50,000 draw from an unauthorized IP, you triggered an automatic federal wire fraud alert. David ripped his arm away, stumbling backward out of his chair. No, you didn't. You wouldn't do that to me. I'm your son. You stopped being my son the moment you looked at your mother's illness as an opportunity to steal her home. I said, my voice finally cracking with the emotion I'd been holding back for days. You thought I was weak. You mistook my kindness, my desire for a quiet life, for stupidity. I spent 35 years hunting professional thieves, David. You are nothing but an amateur who left his fingerprints on the vault door. The silence that followed was suffocating. Miriam was weeping softly, a quiet, heartbreaking sound. I walked over and placed my hand on her shoulder, standing between her and the man who had tried to ruin us. Get out of my house, I told them. David looked at the folder, looked at the TV screen still displaying his cruel words, and finally looked at his mother. He couldn't meet her eyes. He turned and walked out the front door, his shoulders slumped, his life utterly destroyed by his own hand. Chloe grabbed her purse and practically ran out behind him, not looking back once. The consequences unfolded over the next several months, with the cold mechanical precision of a well-oiled machine. Because the bank's fraud department had real-time evidence of the wire fraud attempt, combined with the physical network logs and the forged voice recordings, the investigation was swift and brutal. Novatech Solutions was immediately audited and subsequently seized. David was looking at serious federal charges for wire fraud and elder financial abuse. He was facing years in prison. I am not a vengeful man, but I am a protective one. I sat down with the district attorney and my bank manager. I brokered a deal. I agreed not to push for maximum sentencing on the condition of absolute crushing restitution. To avoid a federal prison cell, David was forced to liquidate every asset he had. He had to sell his luxury SUVs, drain his remaining accounts, and sell his townhouse. He was forced to sign over all of his remaining equity directly to the trust I had established, entirely reimbursing the $4,000 he had stolen, plus legal fees, plus punitive damages that effectively left him with nothing but a suitcase of clothes and a ruined reputation. He received 5 years of supervised probation. He is forbidden by a permanent restraining order from coming within 500 feet of me, Miriam, or our property. Chloe filed for divorce the moment the bank froze their accounts. She realized the money was gone, the facade was broken, and she had no interest in being married to a broke felon. I don't know where she is now, and I frankly do not care. The Aegis hub was taken by the authorities as physical evidence. I replaced it with a simple, secure, monitored alarm system installed by a reputable local security company. No AI, no voice commands, no links to our bank accounts, just a button Miriam can press if she needs an ambulance. The aftermath of Betrayal is a strange landscape to navigate. You don't just wake up one morning and feel okay. There is a mourning process. Miriam and I didn't just lose money, we got that back. We lost the son we thought we had. We lost the future holidays, the prospect of grandchildren, the comfort of family in our final years. But as time has passed, the house has regained its warmth. I hired a wonderful professional in-home nurse named Sarah, who comes by 3 days a week to help Miriam with her physical therapy and keep her company when I need to run errands. Sarah is kind, entirely transparent, and doesn't know a thing about computer code. Miriam's mobility has slowly improved. She can walk with a cane now. The other evening we were sitting on the back porch together watching the fireflies blink in the dusk. I was holding her hand, tracing the veins on the back of her skin, and feeling the steady, reassuring pulse of her life. We survived because we refused to be victims. We survived because I remembered that true safety isn't found in a piece of silicon, a hidden camera, or an artificial voice. True safety is found in vigilance and standing your ground, and in the absolute refusal to let anyone, even your own flesh and blood, strip you of your dignity. We spend so much of our lives trusting the people we love, assuming they hold the same moral compass we do. But sometimes the people who are closest to you are simply standing in the best position to slide the knife in. You have to be willing to open your eyes. You have to be willing to look at the data, read the logs, and accept the truth, no matter how much it breaks your heart. Because in the end, protecting the people who genuinely love you is the only job that truly matters. Before you go, I want to leave you with one final question to think about. Has someone you trusted ever made you question everything you thought you knew about them, and how did you find the strength to stand back up? Share your experience in the comments below. We read all of them, and sometimes knowing you aren't alone is the most powerful tool of all. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you can join us for the next one. Take care of yourselves, trust your instincts, and keep your doors locked.